Welcome to a new Or Hughes podcast. I'm your host, Joe Hughes, alongside my brother, Eric Hughes. New episodes debut every week. You can always find us on YouTube at Or Hughes. You can find me on social media at Vegas Joe Hughes. A lot of focus on the A's this week, Rick. I know you got a chance to go out to the game earlier this week. And what's the vibe like at the Coliseum as we're coming into this final homestand for the A's? You know, the team has been playing better as of late, but it's also kind of got that overarching cloud of what's happening with a potential move to Vegas. So when you go to this final homestand, is it a sorrowful mood? Like, how are people feeling when you're kind of in that area and just walking around the Coliseum?
I think it was a little bit of the reverse experience that you and I had when we went to the A's game in San Diego. So it was an A's Padres game I went to, and there were a lot of Padres fans there. I actually wasn't expecting so many Padres fans. So I think it was like when the A's went to San Diego, we went, and there were way more A's fans than Padres fans. I didn't really get into account to see, who had more, but there was a good amount of Padres fans there. So the vibe, it was kind of hard to tell. I was also there with my kids, so I probably saw like 4 pitches total. The rest of the time
right.
I was chasing kids around and going all over the stadium. It's hard to tell what the vibe is. I think a lot of A's fans are still upset. I think news came out that they set a deadline for when they need to make this vote. The owners to make that vote. So there's still always news coming out about Vegas that no matter how shiny it starts to get on the field, it's already lost its luster, So I think there's still a lot of upset. And then, to be honest, they got swept by the Padres. So then even when you go out there and you're losing again, so it's always great to see Bob Melvin. I think A's fans love Bob Melvin. I think a lot of people did want to go out and see that star-studded lineup. We got to see Fernando Tatis. We got to see Juan Soto and some of those big-name players that San Diego has. So it was exciting. There was some good baseball. I had a great seat for Gelof's bomb on the Saturday game, and just where I was sitting, when they put the little stat tracker on when you're watching on TV, that little yellow arc and everything, I got to appreciate everything. I saw the flight, the takeoff, like where it peaked before it came down. I had just a perfect seat for that. And so, appreciating those little small pieces, knowing that we've got what looks like a star player by all means at this point, and being able to appreciate those small things. So how are other A's fans going? I think is still on an individual level. What's the collective vibe? It's the same. When we get to hear celebration at the end of the game, everybody's happy. And when you don't, it's
it's a day that ends in Y, the way things have gone for the A's this year. And, I was just kind of curious about how things are going, because I was trying to pick what'll be my last game this season. And I might go on Tuesday for the dog day with a friend and take my daughter with me. But I did see somebody on Reddit kind of post that they thought this might be their last A's game ever. They live outside of the Bay Area. They came back, but they're just not sure what's going to happen with next year and if they're going to go at all or if they're done with it. And it was kind of a sorrowful post about just kind of like visiting somebody. The vibe was like visiting somebody in the hospital for the final time, that like they're not going to have a long time and you're just going to say goodbye. And they said that they walked around the Coliseum. They didn't watch as much of the game, and they weren't focused on the on-field thing as much as they were just trying to like have those memories and just kind of walk through the Coliseum, through the concourses, sit in different sections for one final time.
Yeah, I understand that. And that kind of sounds like that was somebody that went there with like the intentionality of really experiencing it. But going back to that reverse boycott, when we were talking about some of the highs in the last podcast, like that was one of the highs, is my kids' experience at that reverse boycott of seeing that huge collective stadium and the feel of everyone, like everyone just like sell the team. like that really got them bought in, and that was something like we got to experience in high school, being lucky enough to live on a BART line and take BART, go to stadiums when we were, sophomores and juniors and all the way throughout, and just having those experiences, going to games that were selling out and seeing really good baseball and seeing the huge fan base that Oakland has. And when they come together and get that Coliseum roaring and experiencing that. So my kids got that experience. They were so bought in. That's why I had to go, because I already said we were going. Honestly, as soon as I saw the comp tickets were expired, I wouldn't have gone, but the kids wanted to go. So I did think yesterday, though, that it was probably going to be my last game of the season. And I didn't so much go into thinking like, oh yeah, they could move. I was kind of like, they have this thing. So I didn't go into that with the intentional feeling of like, hey, really experience this. This could be the end. I just kind of thought, this is the last one for the season. And I'm making the assumption that I will go back next season. If that did turn out to be my last game and I didn't get to have that intentional experience, I think it would be a little bit like, oh, I'll go visit them in the hospital tomorrow. And then they kind of check out. So I thought that was an interesting way that you put it. But one of the things I was thinking about yesterday with being there with the kids and watching literally like 4 pitches, there are so many different parts of the Coliseum to experience. So I was thinking like, what is your favorite area when you get dragged away from the main attraction on the field? Where do you like to find yourself at the Coliseum?
Oh, that's a good question, man. We've had the pleasure of sitting in a lot of different areas. I've had the press pass, so I've been able to go all over, but you and I have sat in the MVP section right behind home plate. We sat right behind the dugout. And then, like all A's fans, you start with the cheapest ticket you can get, and you just work your way to a better seat, which we used to do, especially in high school, before the ushers really started kind of cracking down on that this year.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. But I don't know, man. I've always really enjoyed the second deck along the third baseline. I think you get a good view there, you get a chance for foul balls. I've always kind of enjoyed that area right there. Plus, you're on the A side of the field. Obviously, sitting right behind the dugout is the coolest experience. I also liked when you and I have had a chance to sit near the bullpen right behind it. I remember Justin Dukeshire, throwing back to PCL Pitcher of the Year, Justin Dukeshire, and just watching the curve on his curveball, which was a very impressive 12-6 curveball, just gives you really appreciation for how incredible. I think you and I were watching, like, how is somebody supposed to hit that? Because it looked like a wiffle ball, the way that he could throw it. So, the Coliseum overall, I mean, it's always got this kind of perception as the last dive bar lately, but I think one of the beauties of that is you do have a different experience wherever you get to sit in the Coliseum. Like if you want to get together with your friends, you can go right now to what used to be just the bleachers, but now you can go to different areas like the treehouse. You and I have kids now. We can go to that kids section, so that even though, like you and I have joked before, is like we've gone to games where we've gotten blacked out drunk, and I remember more of going to that game than I do for most games I get to go with my kids, because you're distracted. But now with that kid zone, we do get to watch a little bit of the game. And we do get to watch the kids run around. Like even earlier this season, Jesus Aguilar had an incredible battle that ended with a home run. And I remember getting to watch that at the Coliseum. And the only reason I was able to focus on that was because my kids were running around at the kid zone. So there's so many cool things to be able to do. You can kind of pick your own adventure for what you want to do at the Coliseum, which this was years ago, but I remember Yahoo Sports did a list of like the best feature of every part of the ballpark. And when they got to the Oakland Coliseum, they only wrote one sentence. It was that you can do whatever you want to do at the Oakland Coliseum.
Yeah, I just, I'm somebody that it's tough for me to watch movies, and there's so many movies that people like have just completely expected me to have watched, and they're like, oh, but you've seen it. I just haven't seen it. And honestly, to watch a movie takes me like 3 or 4 days. I fall asleep, I watch it again the next day. The way that they kind of make series now, so you like binge it or whatever, it kind of works a little better for me. Watch it, pause. But I just can't sit and do that. And that's one of the things I love about the Coliseum is I just do so many different things. And like we've even talked on earlier podcasts, like going to games and never going to the seat that is on the ticket that I purchased, and just experiencing so many different parts, from the treehouse to Shibe Park, Championship Plaza, to, you know, sneaking down, or a friend is sitting somewhere, hey, come visit me over here. As far as watching baseball goes, I'm with you. I really like the second deck along the third baseline there, and the infield side, even like right towards third base. I don't mind. I do think the third deck is a little underappreciated, because, you know, it was kind of like what we had to have in high school, because those were the cheapest
$8 tickets, baby.
Oh man, you can't beat it. It's Wednesday. Let's go. So, you know, that's kind of what you've always got. But, you know, every now and then I'll just kind of sneak up and take a view, and you can just get such a nice view up there. You know, I'm with you. Sitting below the dugout or right by the dugout is just an incredible experience. And I've been there a few times with my kids, where my kids are talking to the A's players that are on deck or in the hole. And I've even said, the first time was with my oldest, and she was talking to Chris Davis, and she was like, hey, Crush, go get him. And I said, he can't talk to you. He's got to focus on the game. And literally, as soon as I said that, he turned around and waved to her. My wife and I, both of us, our jaws dropped, and we like waved back. And then just recently we were over there, and my son was going, Noda, Noda. And then Noda turned around, played a little peekaboo with him, then went out, crushed a double. It was great.
I mean, you know, you bring that up, and it brings up a good point, because it's something we talked about early on in this podcast, right after the A's announced their move to Vegas earlier this season, is like, what do you do as a parent? Because these are the interactions, like you're talking about with that KD moment, that help instill fandom in like our kids, which are young. Like my daughter is going to be 6 in a month, and she is asking me about going to A's games and wanting to have that experience, because the reverse boycott is fun. She goes with her cousins, they hang out, they do the let's go Oakland chant, they do the clap, they do all these things that bond generations of fans, that you and I do, and that we've been able to pass on to our kids. But with that looming cloud, it is a little kind of concerning for me how much I want to continue that experience and invest in having that thing together, because I want it. I want those pictures. I want those memories together, even if the team does leave and go to Vegas. But I also don't want my daughter to have this thing that she comes to love and then it's gone. You know, I don't want to like be like, oh, enjoy this puppy while it lasts. You know, like, so how are you feeling about that? I know you were saying that this might be your last game, but it does kind of leave me some questions, just as not just a fan, but as a parent and a fan.
No, I hear you. I'm just another A's fan that has had the same experiences as all A's fans, dealing with this news and having my own emotions and considering like, well, what does this mean for me? Do I want to spend my money so John Fisher gets this money and in the long haul? And you know, I'm also someone that's experiencing increased prices. You know, I'm also somebody that's experiencing my favorite players getting traded away and getting replaced with, you know, veterans that aren't meeting the grade, you know, and luckily they've moved some of those guys on. And
I'm waiting for the name.
I'm not going to say it. And I've said it enough. But yeah, no, I've had all those experiences, and I think I'm somebody that also kind of thought, hey, maybe this is my last game. You know, I'm not somebody that, you know, if there's a business that is disappointing me, I'm not somebody that's going to like continue to give you my business. But then I've got kids, you know, and so that's the other side. And just like you're saying, so the other piece that I'm thinking of is like not getting too far ahead of myself, right? Like the A's right now are still here. My kids do want to go to that. And you know, I guess it's a bridge that we'll cross when that bridge comes up. But right now we're just enjoying
it's a bridge too far journey. Right now. It's a bridge too far.
It is, you know, and I'm like, be quiet in the back seat, you know? Yeah. So no, we're just enjoying the ride. You know, we had a great time yesterday, and we try and really have the experience. You know, we bring peanuts, seeds, get some Cracker Jacks and all that, and really enjoy take me out to the ball game. One thing I did want to do was get a video of my whole family singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" at the A's. And that is something that I do still hope to do. So I am hopeful that it isn't my last game ever, but it could be the last one this season. Maybe not. My oldest really wants to get that Ruiz t-shirt.
I was thinking if I do go, and I know everyone jokes about, bringing their tools and stealing seats and everything like that, which will be readily available whenever the Coliseum is done with its actual, sustainable life. But I was definitely thinking about maybe trying to steal some of that ice plant from around the stadium. I've got a couple of those like small plastic helmets, like the ones they used to do ice cream in, the ones they do nachos in now, and maybe plant some dirt in there and then put that ice plant that has been around the Coliseum for a long time in that. And then it's something you could have in your office kind of upside down as like a little planter box. So maybe that's what I'm thinking about doing in my last game. Or I'll just get the ice plant legally.
Yeah, I was going to say any crimes you commit after planning on them right here on a podcast makes them premeditated. So that's just going to make it a little more severe. I mean, if you want a seat,
the Oakland Coliseum, that's the best part. You can get away with whatever you want to do.
There are thousands of seats in the parking lot. Yeah, just walk on over and take whatever you want. I'm sure they would be very happy to have you help haul them away.
Well, you mentioned that you had a great view of Zack Gelof's homer at the game you went to this weekend. And, we've been talking about it is the BG and AG before Gelof and after Gelof. So even when the A's are losing these games, Gelof is still doing something that gives you optimism and provides a spark to keep watching. He's played 55 games as we tape this podcast today. He is already just behind Ryan Noda as the second most valuable player on this A's team for wins above replacement. Obviously, low bar, worst A's team that we've seen in a long, long time. They've already matched the loss total from last year, back-to-back 100-loss seasons, but Zack Gelof in just 55 games, less than a third of a regular season, is proving to be a star-level player. If that plays out over the regular season, great, but you're talking about those young players. We loved Ryan Noda. We loved Estuary Ruiz. Zack Gelof is even looking like he's going to be on a much higher level than those other promising rookies we talked about.
Yeah, by all appearances, he's a generational talent. And not only do the stats show that, but the intangibles of being able to step up in big moments when it does matter. And he just kind of seems like he's got that short memory, right? Like we've talked about that. Like he is still a rookie. If he makes an error on the field, he shakes it off. If he steps up to the plate, 0 for 2, 0 for 3, that doesn't matter to him. He's coming up and he's looking at the pitcher and he's locked and loaded. And I just love his stance. He just looks like he has so much power, ready to unload there. So no, it's been great. And absolutely looks like a generational talent. One of the things that he is able to do is provide a spark in other players, because he's not a guy that's like coming and going like, I'm doing it, you need to pick it up. He's coming in and he's having fun, and when you're having fun doing it, other guys are going to have fun around you. He's not leading like, you should be at my level and the rest of you aren't at my level, and hopefully he stays level-headed through his development, and that doesn't become a thing, and he's able to continue to spark some of the best out of his teammates.
I think it becomes difficult when you're watching a really bad team, and the A's are a little bit different, right? They had the 12-50 start, and that most of that team is gone. It's kind of gone into this youth movement, but when you're watching a really bad team, it does get hard to compare how good a player is versus how bad the team is. So if you took a guy like Ryan Noda and Estuary Ruiz, who have really stood out on this A's team, and you put them on a good, team around baseball, pick at any team that's going to be in the playoffs, would they just be kind of like, oh, that's cool, good for them, they're looking good, but they would be smaller, they'd be down the rosters, like how you'd notice them. And I think that's one of those differences is Zack Gelof would still be a standout, I feel, on a good team, because he's going to be that next tier of player that actually gets you excited to go watch an A's game at the Coliseum. Whereas I'm really excited to watch, Estuary Ruiz get on base. I really like what Ryan Noda's done, but the guy that's going to get me to want to come out is going to be a guy like Zack Gelof. And I feel like there's a difference there when you're looking around baseball as that marketability to be excited to go watch somebody.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think like one of the big things is like, you see some other guys come up to the plate 0 for 2 or 0 for 3. You just kind of assume it's going to be 0 for 4 now. And you just let's just side retired. Let's change sides here. When Zack Gelof comes up, even if he's having an off night, you still feel like something could happen. And I hear what you're saying. It's like, okay, if Mike Trout came over, would he slide right into the starting lineup or would he be on the bench? Well, obviously, Mike Trout would be in the starting lineup, right?
He'd be on the IL.
Right. Yeah. But if you took Zack Gelof and you did the same thing and you moved him to a bunch of those teams, yeah, a lot of those teams, he would be the starter. If not, he'd be the first guy coming off the bench. And hey, maybe even in a tough spot, like, hey, we need a pinch hit right here, even though he's a rookie, because he kind of just shows like, hey, I'm out here playing baseball. I'm out here having fun.
Yeah, and he looks like a young guy taking a leadership role just through his actions, just through going about his business and playing. People want to follow him. Not one of these things where he, kind of comes in and determines, I want to be a leader. I want to, be that guy that you guys all turn to. He's like, no, I'm just going to go about my business. And people are like gravitate towards that. They want to be around somebody like that. And it's been fun watching some of the transitions we've talked about this season. And Ken Waldichuk is going to get another start right now, but he's a guy that I'm really high on. And we talked about how he closed last year, came into this season. He had a 7.46 ERA in 12 games, 10 starts in April and May. Terrible. It was really rough for a guy that the A's were hoping was going to take a big leap. And he went to the bullpen. The A's worked him out of that bullpen into a starting role. And the results since then have been very good. He started working on his changeup, but he's got a 3.58 ERA in 10 starts since April and May. 3.58 is very good for a left-handed pitcher that you're really high on in his first full season. And that's the other way to judge this is how are these guys growing? Ken Waldichuk, his first full big league season. Shea Langoliers, his first big league season. Even a guy like Brent Rooker, who's been around a little bit, getting to 25 homers in his first big league season. So is there anybody that you've seen this year besides, Zack Gelof, who's the obvious candidate, that seems to you like next year, if you're invested in this team, is ready for a leap, is ready to take a big jump forward and be a more consistent guy rather than like, man, that guy is still growing. He's developing. Obviously they are, but who's ready to take a leap in your eyes?
Well, I hope it's Jordan Diaz. I guess that would be my hope because, he has so much potential and he has shown a lot of development with his glove. He does still show sometimes where you're like, okay, he's going to make this one. And then it hits him in the heel of the glove. And you're a little bit like, come on, man, you got to make that play. But then he comes up, hits a bomb and totally redeems himself, right? Yeah. And so you want to see some consistency from him, and that's a position that still has some question marks. So that's the position that I guess I would say I'm hopeful, and that's the person I'm hopeful makes that leap. For Waldichuk, I agree that he has made a lot of growth too. I think it goes with the team as well, right? The whole team was struggling when Waldichuk was struggling. And there was a lot of still dead weight that the A's have, shown, hey, we're going to move on and we're going to replace that with some younger guys. And so I think Sears is hopefully going to adjust to the workload and see that, hey, this franchise believes in you and they're going to give you a lot of work to go do. And for Urseg as well, I hope he's somebody that also continues to make that jump as he develops. He's moving to a new position. When he showed up the first time I saw Urseg, I didn't even see Urseg. I was looking on an app and watching the play-by-play, and it said there was a third baseman pitching, and I didn't even know who he was. And I was like, great, another blowout. Like, we've got the position player in. So he's making a big transition too, but he's kind of shown he can be a dependable guy that you can count on. So I really hope that with him getting this first season, like, hey, you're our reliever that we're going to go to when we need a guy. So hopefully he can be a guy that makes that big jump too.
Yeah, and I was trying to think about it. I'm glad that so many of these rookies are getting an extended opportunity. We saw Shea Langoliers at the end of last season. We saw Ken Waldichuk and JP Sears get run in that final month and a half of the regular season last year. but that just wasn't enough time for them to really kind of get their feet wet. The guy that's getting that kind of experience right now is Lawrence Butler and Tyler Soderstrom, and you're hoping that they're going to be able to be a big part of next year too. But I'm glad so many A's are getting to that experience level that next year you do feel like it won't be as dreadful. Not necessarily they're going to make a leap to playoff contender right away. It's just not going to be that 12-50 dregs that we saw at the beginning of this year.
I think, the expectation with this year was finding the pieces that would start to be the core. And I think now we have that, right? So I think there are people that you're going to expect to see out there starting next year, where so many of it was a question mark this year. And a lot of those guys who got that job aren't around. And so I do think we can expect that we'll see Butler. I think we can expect that we'll see Ruiz, Noda. Noda was a question mark. I think he's answered that question. I think we're definitely going to see Gelof, Langoliers. So a lot of those questions have been answered. Hopefully Nick Allen and Jordan Diaz can really answer that question on their own and go, hey, look no further. We're your guys. So
I love that infield defense with Gelof and Allen. It looks so smooth right now, the way that those two guys are playing up the middle for the A's. I really, really enjoy just kind of watching that part get solidified and just not have to be like, all right, here we go. Let's see what's going to happen. It's just like, they got it. I'm feeling confident with it.
Last season, there were times it was laughable where literally there's 2 outs and balls would drop, right? Just from communication errors and just basic plays couldn't be made. And so now there are basic plays being made, and there are beyond basic plays being made, and there are highlight reel plays being made. So now instead of just going like, okay, it's a pop-up, that guy better keep running because he's going to make it to third. You're like, okay, here we go. And we got to dig out. There's a double play. So, no, I think next year going into there is more of a core. Hopefully Mason Miller is going to be ready to go. And I think a lot of people would believe that he would be the guy that could get a nod to go out and start the season for us. So, what about you? What are your thoughts from what you've seen from this year and what your hope is for next season?
I think you covered it really well. I mean, like you said, it's about getting that core together and coming into next season with a pitching staff. Like, think back to the starters that were expected to be this year on the pitching staff, right? They were hoping that Paul Blackburn was going to be there, but he started on the IL. Drew Rosinski, we hardly knew ye. And then, Shintaro Fujinami, you look at, all of these guys that were supposed to be there, almost none of them are there. The only guy that's left is JP Sears from that original intended starting rotation. And now you're coming into a year next year where you're like, okay, Paul Blackburn likely to be back unless he's moved to this offseason, leading that rotation, providing that veteran stability that they want. And then after that, it looks so much deeper with guys that we've actually seen cut their teeth at the big league level. JP Sears, he's hitting an inning limit that he's never done before. And that's part of what his growth is the A's want him to stretch out and be able to handle that kind of workload because they really like him. And for a long stretch, he was maybe the A's most consistent starting pitcher. Then you follow that up with guys that have high upside, like you talked about, Mason Miller, Ken Waldachuk, Luis Medina. And all of a sudden you're like, man, where's James Caprillion going to fit in? Is he going to have to be a reliever if he's still going to be here? There's so many guys that are still coming up through the A's system that they have high upside for the pitching that it looks like that's the next part to marry to what you talked about with that core of Shea Langoliers, Zack Gelof, maybe Tyler Soderstrom, Jordan Diaz, Nick Allen, Lawrence Butler, Esteury Ruiz, Ryan Noda, goes on and on and on. Then all of a sudden you're like, man, this is a team I would watch. I would pay money to go watch that team first. I don't have a library comp ticket, so I'm just going to watch on TV.
Here you go. Now, one of the things I've really enjoyed about this season is getting those young guys out there. And like Medina yesterday, to get an opportunity to go against Juan Soto. And, it didn't always go the way that he wanted it to go, but that's going to be a lot better for your development than guys that you're going to be facing in AAA in a season when it doesn't matter. It does not matter. There is nothing you're playing for but experience and development right now. So why not go against the best? And so I'm really excited for them to, cut their teeth at this level and get this learning experience and to really get a whole complete season with now a much more solid foundation. And so if you do want to go add a veteran here or there, and spend a little money to maybe plug some holes, I don't think it's going to be as upsetting to A's fans when, you are bringing in some guys and you're like, what are you bringing these guys in for? To plug some holes.
Yeah, right.
There's too many holes. Yeah. And okay, they're not even plugging their holes. They're soaking right through. So, I think it's a lot more exciting for what the potential could be baseball wise. There's still that looming cloud of Las Vegas that brings some rain over that for a lot of
And you brought it up earlier, was that the owners have set November as the deadline for when they're going to have a relocation vote. And there's this thing in news and, in media that's called take out the trash day. Usually people would put their bad news out on Friday, right before the weekend, because that's when no one's going to be paying attention to it. And November is that for baseball. It's after the World Series has ended. You've got NBA getting ramped up. You've got NFL in full swing. So people aren't paying attention to baseball, and it's before you get into like the off-season program. So you kind of dump your news there. You maybe take a bad hit for a day or two, but no one's going to be talking about it. And then you can kind of get into your off-season program. So it's kind of concerning for me just on when they've scheduled this that, it feels like a little bit of an inevitability. You do still have the potential that Vegas money could wind up on the ballot next year, which is good. But what John Fisher needs is that January 15th deadline. He needs a binding deal. The next step is the MLB owners voting to approve Vegas. And then by January 15th, he's got to have that done deal so that he can stay on revenue sharing. As he has told in his interviews, the A's need to stay on revenue sharing for this business to continue the operations the way that they have. As pathetic as it has been financially, that's just kind of what is on the docket. So overall, just it is a little looming as we talked about some of these positives with these young players. It always feels like as soon as you're like, okay, there's some optimism here, I'm feeling good. And then it's just like one more punch to the gut to be like, don't forget, it's going to end poorly.
Yeah. And that, going back to your original question, that impacts the vibes for A's players, right? Like when like, hey, I already am not a billionaire. This is my hard-earned money. And
I checked today. My bank account does not have that many comments in it.
No, mine either. And maybe if we put them together, we'll still be short. Yeah. So then you think, what do I want to give my hard-earned money for? And then to know that this guy's pretty much going to take your money and go, hey, I'm going to use your money to move. It's a little bit upsetting, And so I do understand A's fans that, like that guy said, that goes, I'm not going in. And I do wonder, like, what it will be like, when it is all done and dusted, if it does get to that. But that is a bridge that is down the road that we don't have to cross yet. And until that happens, if you got some free tickets, send them my way, because my kids would love to get out there. And I, like the rest of you, don't want to give my hard-earned money over there, So
this has been the Or Hughes Podcast. New episodes debut every week. You can find us on YouTube, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts at. You can find us at Or Hughes. You can find me on social media at Vegas Joe Hughes, and we'll talk again next week.